Sherry George with the League of Women. I'm Sherry George with the League of Women Voters of Alaska. And as many of you know who've attended this seminars in the past, the Leagues of Maine, Alaska, and Colorado have worked together to offer over 20 seminars since the fall of 2022. And we've had speakers who addressed many issues, including fighting back on election interference, the Silicon Valley tech coup, keeping kids safe online, regulating technology, and most recently, Courtney Radge, who dove into AI journalism and democracy. But today, we're so pleased to have Dr. Beth Simone Noveck join us and shine some light on AI and how these powerful tools can be harnessed to reinforce rather than undermine our democracy. So a good light on AI and what it might be able to do for us, governance and collaboration. Beth is a professor at Northeastern University, where she directs the Burns Center for Social Change and its partner project, the Governance Lab, sometimes called the Gov Lab. Beth's work focuses on using AI to reimagine participatory democracy and strengthen governance. Her newest book, Reboot, AI and the Race to Save Democracy, will be coming out soon. I encourage you to learn more about Beth by checking out her bio on the URL that Ann Luther will put in the chat. We want your questions and concerns to be answered, and Beth is really great at taking questions from the field. So throughout our time together, please enter your questions into Q&A, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So Beth, we're turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, and I am just so delighted to be here. I am grateful for the invitation, but more importantly, I'm really grateful for the work of the League of Women Voters. I know that quite a number of my students are here, and I want them to know, if they don't already, that the League of Women Voters is just such an important organization. It is really one of the bulwarks of our democracy, populated entirely, I believe, by volunteers who do the work of ensuring the safety and integrity of our elections and our democratic system. And it's just such an important organization. So I am thrilled to be here. I will kind of try to do a bit of an overview on this topic and then save a lot of time for conversations, because I know what I'm going to say is a little bit controversial. Our organizations that we work with, the GovLab and its partner project at Northeastern called the Burns Center for Social Change, are very much focused on, let me call it, the positive, proactive ways we can use technology, and not all technology, the right technology, to strengthen democracy, to improve governance, and to improve lives. That is not, however, always how we think about technology. And I know that this whole series is really largely positioned as the threats to our democracy. And that's kind of where I want to start. But I welcome the conversation and the discussion about how do we get it right and avoid the dangers that we read about so often in the paper. I don't have to tell this group about the concerns we have about our democracy today. The concerns are extraordinarily acute and serious, but it's not new to ask the question, as John Adams did 200 years ago, whether democracy is really on its last gasp, on its last breath. The crisis of our democracy, if you will, is not one thing. It is a multi-headed hydra that stems from the fact that really democracy, as Walt Whitman said, is a word that we don't really know the real gist of. We use it all the time. We talk about it, but it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So by whatever definition, and I'll talk about some of these different definitions and what these crises look like, but by whatever definition, our democracies are not doing that well. And that's the case not just in the United States, where we worry that we are descending into autocracy, where we are concerned that the rule of law is extraordinarily fragile. But it is the case around the world, where according to the Swedish institute called VDEM, Most of the world is living now in autocracies, and we only have really a handful of democracies left. So this is a really global problem. It is a problem of also obviously in the United States, and it is paired with the fact that people, both Republican and Democrat, but especially Democrat now, believe that we are living in a very, very divided country, and one in which our systems of democracy may not survive. Enter AI at this moment in time where democracy is already so fragile and we're so concerned about it, and we add in all these fears we have about AI. The concern that the robot apocalypse is around the corner, that AI is going to essentially take over for humanity. It's going to destroy humanity. It's going to lead to mass unemployment. We are worried about concerns of misinformation and disinformation and deep fakes. And these concerns are very, very justified. Let me say a little bit about some of these crises and the way that AI is exacerbating them. And then I want to talk about and spend most of our time on what we can do about them and the other side of that coin. So we've had lots of conversations about the fragility of our elections. Our students just talked actually today. We were discussing about the fights that are going on most recently now in Missouri, in California, and in Texas about the redrawing of the electoral maps. We saw what happened with the storming of the Capitol. We are worried that our elections are being sabotaged, or at least that there's a perception that they are being sabotaged and that they are not safe or secure. And this is, of course, a myth that the election, especially in 2020, was somehow rigged. That is a myth that has been propagated by many, many people, including people in power who won in those elections, and yet who have been talking about how those elections were sabotaged. And then you add into it AI. It didn't kind of pan out in November, but there were a lot of fears that AI was going to lead to tremendous electoral abuses. And there was a lot of discussion, and we've surely seen for people here who come from other countries, especially places like India or Pakistan, where they have witnessed the tremendous use of disinformation via WhatsApp, especially around electoral campaigns. We've seen a lot of worries about how AI can propagate disinformation that can lead to political manipulation and abuse. And again, a lot more to say there. There is, of course, a crisis that not just on election day, one day a year, but the other 364 days a year, we are experiencing a crisis of truth, that we live in a world in which facts don't matter to a lot of people, in which I just like this cartoon so much, so I had to use it. You may remember the discussion in the last campaign about how they're eating the dogs and eating the cats, something we knew to be false about Springfield. But those lies are propagated, and of course, technology is making it faster and easier to cause lies to spread at lightning speed. It was a problem we already have experienced with the internet, and it's only gotten bigger with AI, where it becomes faster and easier to propagate and disseminate false information. Whether it's the Pope wearing a puffer jacket, something quite harmless, or whether it's Biden, the voice of Biden, in this case, not really Biden, but a fake, calling voters in New Hampshire and telling them they shouldn't go to the polls. We worry about the crisis, the way in which AI is being used to propagate disinformation, again, not only around elections, but all year round. And there's too many examples now to name. We're worried about the crisis of representation. That is to say, in our democracy, one aspect of our democracy, for many people, it's about voting. For a lot of people, it's about this idea that we elect representatives to speak for us, again, through elections, and that they represent our views, whether it's the people we elect to serve on our condo board or the people we elect to go to Congress for us. The system is supposed to work in a way that our representatives speak for us. But what's happening in Congress? These are the words that members of Congress themselves use to describe the Congress that they have decided to leave. And I think if we just look around at how little legislation Congress is passing, and at the general views that people have about Congress, which is very, very low rates of trust, and globally, again, it's not unique to the US, most people globally feel that they have no voice in the lawmaking that happens in their country, that they have no way to influence that system, that they're not listened to, that it is only people with money or people with in certain kinds of power that have any say over what happens. And that has led to declining rates of trust, again, globally in government and in America in government. And it's only exacerbated by the fact that for most of us, our interaction with Congress and with our lawmakers, whether it's federal or state or local, is constant barrage of text messages we get telling us to donate, 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 donate to a system over which we feel we have no say. A related problem is that our system is supposed to allow us to participate, right? Democracy, well, what do we say? It's of the people, by the people, for the people. And yet that of and by and for the people, if you ask probably most people here, they will tell you there's very few ways for me to actually get involved in our democracy. Right. So very few people see opportunities to participate. Again, this is a global phenomenon. The people feel they don't have a say in any kind of decision making. That problem is potentially being made worse by AI, just to come back to the tech thing here for a moment, in a world in which instead of engaging with actual humans, instead of going out and talking to real people, companies and governments alike are recognizing that they can simulate people. I put up this old article about, thankfully, Meta has gotten rid of some of these characters that they rolled out originally on WhatsApp, but you may have come across these. Instead of talking to real people, now we're talking to silicone people. We're talking to simulated people. So there are companies out there that offer the service of saying, instead of having to do the expensive, hard, and difficult work of talking to humans, you could just go out and talk to AI and simulate what humans would actually tell you, further decreasing the opportunities for participation or engagement. And all of this, for many people, again, the crisis of our democracy, what's happening with our democracy is not just about elections or about representation or even about truth. It's just about how we're behaving towards one another. We don't live in a world in which people trust one another, in which they are nice to one another, in which we are kind to our neighbor. As evidenced by the fact that now most people feel that they would not date somebody or go out with somebody of the opposite political party. So as we know, there is a deep sense of partisanship, a deep sense of incivility that is making it harder and harder to talk to our neighbors about the issues that matter. And this is potentially, again, getting harder because social media companies, because tech companies now have come out, especially since the last election, and said, you know what? We're not going to reduce the incivility on our platforms in a way that we could with new technology. We're going to let people handle it for themselves. We're going to allow hate speech to flourish. We're going to allow people to say whatever they want. And we'll leave it up to you to decide, essentially. So again, a lot more to say about that, but I think we all feel the rising tide of incivility as evidenced in its extremes by the rising tide of violence. You may have heard that in the last hour, Charlie Kirk, the right-wing activist and influencer, was shot in Utah. I haven't heard how badly, but as of a few minutes ago, he was shot by somebody. So this incivility finds it has, when taken to the extreme, leads to the kind of rising tide of violence that we're seeing in this country. Finally, the crisis that we're witnessing, and probably for most people, the way that they experience it, is not once a year on election day. It's not even on Facebook or on X or on Blue Sky or on social media. It's in the experience with the crisis of our institutions. It's in the fact that our governing institutions are institutions that are meant to be governed by the rule of law, that are meant to be, again, representative of our desires, and then use our taxpayer dollars to give out the benefits and services that we have democratically decided to spend our money on, that they are not working as well as they ought to. The People do not trust government to do what is right. People do not believe that government can solve problems anymore. People do not feel that government is responsive. And that was really found its pinnacle in the whole conversation around Doge, that continues even with the kind of departure of Elon Musk from government, and even the conversations about Doge have receded a little bit into the background. But there is still this very widespread conversation about who works in government, how much do we spend on government, what does government accomplish? It's a conversation we've been having, especially since, I would say, Reagan and Thatcher, where we've had this very dominant debate about big government versus small government and what is the right role of government. That's really found its apogee right now, as the government has been gutted to such an extent, where we have eliminated whole agencies and organizations, whether it's USAID, or now just rampant firing of tens of thousands of workers. But even whether you're left or right, and whether you believe in big or small government, I think everybody agrees, and a lot of ink has been spilled on the question of whether government is working as well as it ought to. And the short answer is it doesn't. You only need to watch Zootopia to see the gag about sloths at the DMV. You only need to try to call a government agency to get your unemployment benefits or your Social Security. And now it's getting even harder with fewer people working in government, to get someone to answer the phone and answer the questions that you want. And government is not there when it needs to be. So whether it's wildfires in LA, whether it's flooding in Spain, as we saw, whether it's COVID over 5 years ago, or other diseases now that are on the uptick, we don't feel government is doing as well as it ought to. This is a young baby by the name of Willow Jade. You may recognize her name because she unfortunately died from baby formula that was contaminated with bacteria produced in an Abbott baby food processing plant. In the baby food kind of scares that happened probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, that some of you may recall. One of the reasons, and this is, it hasn't been fully analyzed why it happened, but one of the reasons we can surmise, or one of the concerns that we have, is that at the time, the number of people at the Food and Drug Administration actively looking at the safety of baby formula in this country, in a country of over 300 million people, is 9 people who are in charge of that system. And most of those 9 people are now gone. So I think the concerns that we have about whether government is going to be able to protect us are only getting bigger. Okay, so now comes the part, having spent half my time talking about all the challenges, now let me shift to spending the last half of my time on trying to convince you that tech is actually not the enemy here. It could be, if used correctly, it could be our friend. We have a lot of proposals about how to fix democracy, how to make government work better, etc. But a lot of those are very long-term, not in my lifetime proposals. Enlarging the Senate, increasing the size of the Supreme Court, even redrawing district maps. Those are very slow solutions, in contrast to what we might do with technology. Whether we will do it, whether it's how we're going to use technology, is not entirely clear, and that depends a lot on us. To be very clear, the technologies, when we talk about AI, the major tools, the things you've heard of now, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, the common commercial tools, these are commercial tools run by companies whose desire it is to make a profit. So we have to ask the question at the outset, are we just letting the fox into the henhouse when we put these tools into our governments, into our schools, into our electoral systems? We know there's a lot of concerns about what happens when government uses technology in the wrong way. I'll take an example outside the US, but there are plenty of concerns we have here when we talk about things like using AI to comb through mortgage records to identify potential errors on mortgage applications for certain government officials and use that to try to fire them, as is happening here. Iran has been using AI and computer vision. This is now not ChatGPT, but older forms of AI, computer vision, to spy on women, driving in a car without wearing their hijab and then send them a fine. So there's lots of examples of government using AI for surveillance. There's lots of examples. If you saw the Netflix show about the Horizon scandal in the UK, where government used, in this case, this predates AI, but it's a case of government using technology in a way that led to innocent people being accused of crimes, innocent people going to jail, and in this case, losing their livelihoods, and in several cases, committing suicide because of the legal action they were put under. And government dug its heels in and said, you know, it's the fault. The computer system is great, when it turned out it was actually just a flaw in the computer system. But it was such a bad misuse of technology. We're very familiar, I think, with all the things that can go wrong. So let me say a final word about what can go right. With this newest generation of large language models and generative AI, as well as the older forms of AI that we sometimes call, we might know as machine learning, essentially these tools that allow us to process large quantities of data or large quantities of words, which is just another form of data, they're powerful things that these can do. It can help us to make sense of large quantities of information faster than ever before. These are really powerful word processors, or if you like to think of it, really powerful calculators that can allow us to do things just faster and better that we haven't been able to do. Not only are these tools really good at processing data, but we can interact with them by voice, not just by text or typing. I can talk with them. And these tools are increasingly everywhere. Nobody likes it in their iPhone. This Apple Intelligence has not taken off, but you're familiar. It's in your phone. It's in your email. It's in your word processing program. These tools are not just some separate thing over here called ChatGPT. It's finding its way into all of the tools that you use. When you go to do a Google search, you're getting AI in the results that you get back. We all have access to these tools. And because the new generation of tools are large word processing tools rather than just number processing tools, they're tools that we direct with plain language. So you don't have to be a computer programmer. I know that there are a number of people around the table who are computer programmers and studying computer science, but frankly, to be able to use ChatGPT or Claude or one of these powerful tools, all you need to know is how to speak, not even English. You can speak any language. These tools are guided by plain language, and that means we can all use them. And there are people going out and using them to respond to these crises in our democracy. So Quiller, for example, is a platform that is helping ordinary folks compete with the moneyed candidates by running their own electoral campaigns, by writing campaign content, by making campaign posters, and allowing people to run for office who would have never been able to run for office before. The Cooperative Impact Lab, the picture on the upper left, they do work with community interest groups on helping to improve the quality of our elections. So they have been working with Stacey Abrams and other groups on doing things like using AI to improve the process of voter canvassing. So when you go door to door to ask voters what they want and what they're interested in, they're using AI to help synthesize what they're hearing from people and ensure that political campaigns are more responsive. We have groups in Europe that have been using new technology now for many years, even long predating AI. And I won't go into too many details here, but happy to share these, more links to these, that are using technology to help voters get matched to political candidates and political parties that share the same preferences. So instead of having to look through lots and lots of information, I can answer a couple of questions and essentially get back almost like a quiz and be told, hey, here are the candidates and parties that match your preferences, to find better ways of actually participating in the electoral process. There's a wonderful organization that was working in 53 countries around the world called Medan. Medan uses AI in partnership with media organizations to respond to the crisis of truth by dramatically accelerating the process of fact-checking on platforms like Meta, like WhatsApp, and other common platforms to ensure that in elections, including in the Mexican election recently, in the Brazilian election not too long ago, and in the US, that we are better and faster able to respond to disinformation and misinformation. As much as AI helps to create misinformation, it also makes it faster and easier for us to spot that misinformation and to share better information. Jigsaw, which is the human rights arm of Google, has been doing work using large language models, using generative AI to experiment with new forms of citizen engagement. And to support, they have been using tools, for example, if you ever go on the comment section of the New York Times or on other common platforms, they're using it first to remove hate speech. They partner with other media companies, but now they're also doing work, as they've been doing in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and other places, to test the use of AI to do large-scale citizen engagement and summarize that engagement. Let me talk for a moment about the crisis of representation, where we've talked about the way in which legislatures are not really responsive to our needs. We don't know what's happening in our legislatures, and we don't have a way to get involved. Well, in California, there's a phenomenal group called Cal Matters that runs a project called the Digital Democracy Project. The Digital Democracy Project is bringing transparency to how the legislature works in California, and using AI not just to summarize everything that's said, but to turn what's said in Sacramento into one-page kind of tip sheets or summaries that can then be given to journalists and to the public, so that we have a better idea what's happening in the halls of power. There's not a lot, especially in local journalism, there's not enough people around to cover state legislatures and local legislatures. When places like Digital Democracy operate in California, or the city of Boston starts using AI to summarize what happens in city council meetings, it enables more of us to understand what's happening and to get involved as they're doing. Just to give you one more example in the realm a little bit more of fantasy, I don't have time to show you this video here, but if you've ever looked up, this is Reid Hoffman, he's the founder of LinkedIn. Reid Hoffman is on the left. On the right is an AI-generated version of Reid Hoffman. Why do I show you this? It's kind of nifty just to see what AI Reid Hoffman, he does a good video of him talking to his AI self. You might have seen him on Colbert talking about this, and he has a new book out where he talks about this. The reason I show you this is just imagine if every one of our legislators and representatives had an AI version of themselves trained on their own words, on their own positions, so that every constituent could have a conversation with their lawmaker. How often now do you get a chance to talk to your member of Congress, even to your state representative, or even to your city council representative? Probably not at all. AI could help our elected representatives, and some are experimenting with this, to actually have conversations with their legislators. We could participate in new ways in which organizations and institutions could not only go out and ask us, but actually hear what we have to say. So in Mexico, for example, they've been running dialogues together with their Supreme Court about how to reform their judicial system. Thousands of people have participated. But how is the government or the Supreme Court supposed to make sense of participation from thousands of people? Well, what they've done is they've recorded those conversations, and then they use AI to summarize it to allow the Supreme Court to hear and to act on the recommendations. In New Jersey, where I have a role advising the governor on AI, we've been using AI, again, to do similar things, to go out and ask thousands of people for their input on things like our AI policy, and to use that to make it easier for us to listen. In the UK, they estimate the tremendous cost savings that they get from doing this. Right now, they have quantified that for one citizen engagement, it can take 25 people months of time to run a citizen engagement. Now, if I can bring down the cost, because AI allows me to do summaries, I can do many, many more forms of citizen engagement, which is what they're doing in cities like Hamburg and Leipzig, Germany. That's what these images are from. And now, because it's so successful, they have shared their tools, I just heard, with 9 other cities that are starting to run citizen engagement and listen to citizens about urban planning in those communities. I mentioned before, sorry, this was the example I mentioned before about Jigsaw and the Human Rights Division of Google. The tool they use is called Perspective, that they use to reduce toxicity online. It's running underneath the hood in the comment section on a lot of common platforms. And again, they're using that processing power of AI to do a lot of this kind of spotting of problematic content and make it easier to synthesize. So in the interest of getting to our conversation, I'm going to just skip a couple of slides here because I want to just get to my last example about the crisis of institutional competence. Maybe I'll use 2 slides here and then I will get to the end. So this is probably an area where AI is having the most impact, is in allowing governments to deliver better services to citizens. So these are slides that I've stolen from the mayor of Taoyuan, Taiwan. It's Taiwan's second largest city, where they are using AI to do all kinds of things. I don't have to read you the slide here, but they're doing it especially, I love this example, to reduce the time it takes for an ambulance to get to the hospital. That has tremendous literally life-saving consequences when you reduce the time it takes for a heart attack victim or a stroke victim to get to the hospital. Closer to home in New Jersey, the team that I have worked with for many years has just used AI over the summer to comb through the roles of children who may be eligible for a food benefit and to give literally hundreds of thousands of people a benefit that they didn't know they were entitled to because, for example, we didn't know that this John Smith was actually the same as this James Smith, or this kid who was in foster care over here was moved to over here. And so they fell between the cracks in some database. It allowed us to essentially identify kids who were entitled to a food benefit. The AI is helping even the smallest cities like the borough of Prospect Park, which has just a few thousand people, and the country's youngest mayor to be able to deliver services 24/7. So you can see here it says Ask AI, and the city allows you to get answers to your question about city services like trash pickup and such things in a way that previously only a bigger cities could do. Okay, let me wrap up by saying I'm going to skip ahead to just a last few resources, a last sort of what do we do about all of this. We need, if we want to realize this vision of doing more of this, if we want to use AI in a way that is actually going to improve our democracy and improve our government, there's a couple of things that we need to do. Number one, we have to care about what is the AI that we're using. We have to use our procurement power. Government is the largest purchaser of tech in the country and in the world. We have to use the power of our purse to make demands of these companies and to say, we want the tools that will allow us to make people's lives better, to which that is accountable to us, the public, that is using our government data to deliver better services to people and to deal with these crises of our democracy. We're going to need much, much, much more research to understand how do we use AI responsibly and ethically in ways that actually deepen our democracy. That means we have to work on problems that matter. We have to ask questions like, how can we use AI to restore truth? How can we use AI to improve civility? Not just all the things that are wrong about AI, but what are the things that we can do right? That means a lot of training. We need to educate both people inside government and outside government. We need to educate civil society leaders and people who care about democracy and its future about ways in which we can use AI to make our democracy stronger and more effective. And that means we all have to be involved in the process of building this AI. It cannot be designed simply by companies and hope we'll get it right. It means we actually have to be engaged. We have to learn something about AI, what it is, what it can do, and what it can't do, and get involved in the process of building these tools if we want to have the tools that will work for our democracy. So I will close there. And I'll leave you with 2 links and resources. One is if you want to learn more, we provide a lot of free training and learning about AI at a website called Innovate US. That's innovate-us.org. We have 3 to 4 workshops a week about AI and civic technology and other ways that we can use AI to improve and deepen our democracy. And the last thing I'll end with is a plug for and a little celebration of a dozen of the people on the call today who are our AI for Impact students who are spending the next 6 months working with states like Massachusetts and cities like Boston and other jurisdictions to do just this, to build AI tools that are open, that are public, that are built with citizen input and engagement, and that are designed to make democracy stronger and government work better. So I want to just commend them for their public service, and that they're spending the time thinking about not just how to use tech to make another buck, but how they might use tech to improve other people's lives. And where I'm thrilled that they can join us today together with our leaders from the League of Women Voters. So let me stop there and say thank you, and I'll end the slide share.
Well, thanks a lot, Beth. A lot to think about, and we have some questions in the Q&A window, and we've also got some questions that were emailed to us earlier. The people may or may not be online, so if I'm reading your question at some point and I don't quite get it correct, you could hop in if you're online. Would you prefer to just look at the questions yourself and answer them? Would you like me to read them to you? How would you like to do that?
So I'm just scanning over some of the open comments and questions here, and maybe in no particular order. So Pua mentioned the shooting, which I just mentioned a few minutes ago, and the rising violence, which obviously is of great concern to all of us, and I think it's why it's not. You don't ask it as a question. So if there's a question in there, then I'm happy to try to answer. But I think it's why we have to care about this question of things like using AI to improve civility, using AI to improve and fight misinformation and disinformation, and above all, using new technology to give people an outlet to make change happen in their own community. I think too many people feel extraordinarily frustrated. Now, those who resort to gun violence have much deeper problems and issues, and we can get into, there's a whole lot to say about the gun violence problem that's beyond the scope of the time we have here. But I think so many people, even those who don't resort to violence, are so frustrated by the difficulty of making change happen. And it's one of the reasons I'm so excited about AI. Again, when used right, is because this is a set of tools that anybody can use, that can be controlled with plain language, and it can give the ability for you or me or anyone to potentially build or make something that can improve things in their own community. So this is where I want to just say 3 more seconds about another project that some of my colleagues have been leading, some of whom may be on the call or not, which is a project we call our AIEP project. Some of you may be familiar with the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan that's a child with disabilities receives in public education in America. And about 15 to 20% of kids in public schools have an IEP. When you are handed an IEP as a parent, that is a potentially 50 to 100 page PDF in complicated legalese. Very hard to make sense of if you're an educated, affluent person who can afford to go out and hire a consultant and a psychologist and a lawyer to fight for the rights for your child in public education. How much harder is it if you don't have any of those advantages, if English isn't your native language, if you are not literate? So long story short, my colleagues have been working with a group of parents in California to build a tool to translate into multiple languages, especially Spanish now, to summarize and to understand their IEP and to understand what rights they're entitled to for their child. I'm just wanted to mention this. I'm really excited about it, and we can put a link to it in the chat, because it's just a great example of ordinary people with no technical background using these powerful tools to fight for a right and to make government work better for them. Okay, so let me go on to some of these other things here. I think there was a comment about Taiwan. Use of AI in Taiwan's democracy was asked. So I think Michael Fisher is asking a question You've probably heard about some of the work of the former digital minister of Taiwan, the first transgender cabinet minister in Asia, if not in the world, Audrey Tang, who was an activist, a democracy activist in Taiwan, then became part of the government, and who was really spearheading a lot of efforts to use new technology platforms to give ordinary people a chance to participate in their democracy. And the project that became really famous and received a lot of attention here is a project called V Taiwan that allowed ordinary people to weigh in on the lawmaking process in Taiwan. And they made about 26 pieces of legislation with citizen input. So you heard a lot about this because Taiwan and Audrey is a phenomenal spokesperson for the work that they're doing. But you may not know that in Brazil, they have for a long time, they have a 15-person citizen engagement office in their Senate and a similarly sized effort in their House of Representatives that builds tools for citizens to participate in their lawmaking process. There are countries like Spain and others where, again, or in Madrid, a city where citizens have the ability to propose legislation. And if they get enough signatures on that petition, they can introduce essentially a law for consideration by their legislature. But that's pretty hard to do. So in Brazil, for example, they let citizens write questions for every congressional hearing. So the lawmakers, when they interview a witness that appears, those are questions that are more often than not written by members of the public, because 80% of the questions that they're asking are coming from members of the public. So it's not limited to Taiwan. Audrey has been probably one of the best kind of advocates for using tech for engagement, and it has brought a lot of attention to the issue. But there are many countries where they have been out ahead leading and thinking about how they're using technology to make their institutions more transparent, more responsive, more accountable, and more participatory in ways that we are very much behind on doing. Let me see if I can get Sherry. Have you seen another question that you like? Because I'm talking so much that I might not have read them all, but I'll try to do them at the same time.
Well, what I am going to throw in is one that we got through the email early on when we were promoting this presentation. And I want to make sure a question gets answered because she was, she really wrote a very nice email to us. But her basic question was this is kind of a little bit off center of what we were talking about, but she says, powering AI has societal and environmental costs. What are your thoughts on the requirements for electrical and water resources, especially as these needs have deleterious effects on people's homes and pocketbooks? So it's a little bit off of our topic, but
It's not,
I
I don't
think
think
you
it's
know
off
a
of our
lot about
topic. Well, I don't think it's off of our topic at all. Climate change is obviously an existential threat. And we always have to balance the advantages against the risks. What I wish I had handy, because there's some great new data on this, including some research that Google just came out with a week ago that we put in our newsletter. And I don't know if you guys can put in, or I'll try to everybody. I publish a weekly compilation of news about AI and democracy at our Reboot blog. So I'll try to put that in the chat at the same time, if we can make it accessible to people. But we published some of that data, but essentially I think there's three answers to this thing. One is we've seen the evolution of new large language models, of new forms of AI, especially the DeepSeek model that's come out of China, which is dramatically less energy intensive. There are also new techniques in AI that are, dramatically reduce the amount of energy consumption. And the reason I mentioned the Chinese model, there are a lot of, I know somebody said they have a national security or a security group that they talk about. There's a lot of discussion about the security issues and the geopolitical kind of race or fight between the US and China, or between Europe, the US and China on these issues. But even if we don't use the DeepSeek model here, or we're worried about the security issues, the evolution of these new techniques spurs competition to create models that are more energy intensive. It spurs research into how we reduce the energy consumption costs that I think is extraordinarily important. I think the second thing is it gets back to the question of what are we using this stuff for? If you're using this just to generate, I don't know, new designs for Labubu dolls. I'm not sure if everybody here is following the Labubu craze, but if you're not, look it up. It's it's the latest craze of the summer. Then it is a wasteful use in my view, and it does not justify the energy expenditure. But if we're using these tools to do the research faster that allows us to fight climate change, if we're using these tools to dramatically increase the speed with which we are developing cures to orphan diseases, then I think it is the cost benefit analysis is quite tremendous. I think that it is potentially saving us energy in the long run. It's saving us time. It's efficient. It has tremendous efficiency benefits, but this comes back to how and why we're using these tools and what we're using them for. And the third thing is, again, I think we have to use our purchasing power. We have to demand that these tools be used in a more energy efficient way. And we cannot let AI companies, as they have been trying to do, argue for a preference that they get to jump the line in terms of energy consumption or to get favorable pricing over that of consumers or other uses. So I think it's a multi-part answer. But it starts with ensuring that we innovate in ways that we can improve the essentially efficiency of how we use these things, and I think we're going to see some of that. So I put a link which I hope you can share. I'm not sure I can share it with everybody, but hopefully it can be copied. That's the blog where we share these stories, and I think it was in last week's issue of News of the Week that we shared some of this. If you just put in Google or you put in energy, you'll find some of this latest research on how much energy it actually takes to run a Gemini search, which is Google's large language model, or a ChatGPT search, etc. But the costs are, and the energy consumption level is dramatically coming down, as you would expect as the technology evolves.
I think there's a couple threads both in online here and from other ones that we received that come to the question that almost every one of our speakers has been forced into trying to answer, which is if generative AI is learning, so to speak, from what's out there, and what's out there is biased. What's out there maybe much is not true. It's actually not true. How, when it then summarizes for us, how do we know anything about how good that, well, it may do a very good job of summarizing very poor information is basically the problem. And how do we know, how do we have faith in what it's summarizing for us or where it came from? Because there's so much bad information out there. Now the bad information could overwhelm the actual true and good information. How do you wade through that one? Several questions here kind of aim at that, and then some of them that were emailed to us ask this same question.
Great. Let me give
What's
a quick.
truth?
Well, there's a that's a long topic, but let me give a
Yes.
quick answer to a very deep set of questions. Maybe what is truth is we have to have it's not quite cocktail hour
Yes,
here on the
right,
East
right,
Coast,
right.
but I think that requires a glass of red wine. And then I want to take I see some other good questions that have come in from Kathy and from Woody. Who himself is quite the expert on AI. So I wish he could join the conversation. So if it's the person that I think that it is, so the short answer is it's why we need to learn how to use these tools. As we confronted with the internet and the advent of the web 30 years ago, when we asked the same question, how are we ever going to, like, what is this new platform and how do we use it? And our kids are going to be corrupted by this. And then we became more accustomed to understanding how do I do things like you do a Google search and evaluate information. And we started to develop programs in schools that taught the topic of critical media literacy. We need similarly to get exposure to these tools to understand, and again, they're still very new, they still are changing a lot. And it's important to use and try more than one of them to understand what they do well, what they don't do well, and how they differ. If you've never so you may go on Google now, and if you run a search, you get this little paragraph at the top that synthesizes, gives you an answer to your question in an effort to kind of short circuit your search. And I'm sure a lot of people find like, oh, those paragraphs may not be very helpful and they may not be very transparent. Number one, there are tools that are better, and it differs depending on what product you use, that at actually giving you a citation and a source. And you can say, like, I want to know where you got this from. I don't want to just take it at its face value. It's why it's really important, again, to know how do I use these things and what can I rely on, number one. Number two, a familiarity with the tools helps you to understand that they're like having a really good assistant or research assistant or student helper. If you ever hired a student to do anything for you, whether it's to mow your lawn or to do research, it helps to know what you're looking for. If you don't know, the kid mows your lawn, you hire a 14-year-old to mow your lawn, and you don't give them any directions, you might find that they've mowed over your rose bushes, right? So where the 14-year-old is going to be really great at mowing your lawn is where you give them some clear directions and you know what you want and you can assess it. So where these tools tend to be really good is on something where you know something about the topic. It's just a better word processor in the way that you use it. If you know something about how to do research in a library or how to evaluate sources critically, you're going to be that critical media literacy that we learned potentially or should have learned in high school that has nothing to do with new technology. It's how we learned how to use the library. Those set of skills are getting even more important than ever so that I can, as this spits out more and more content back at me, I know how to ask the question, where does this come from? Is this a reliable source? Let me check a second source to make sure that I'm not relying only on one source. So it has nothing to do with AI. It's like, if you know how to use the library and you learn how to give good instructions, you can use these tools really powerfully. But we're in a transitional moment where this stuff is coming at us fast and furiously. We're often too reliant on it because it's very easy. And therefore, we often, cannot evaluate fact from fiction, or we haven't really taken the time to learn these tools so that we can critically evaluate what's working and what's not working. I'll give you a quick, at the risk of going into this for too long, because I want to get to some of these other questions. The resources that we show, the free trainings that we provide, all use multiple platforms. Every example, we will give you one example with ChatGPT, another example with Claude, a third example with Google's product Gemini. We feel it's really, really important for you to see how these different products perform rather than relying on only one. So we got asked by somebody, hey, can you take all of that out? Because where I work, we're only allowed to use this one tool. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. Number one, because we're not here to sell a technology or to only promote this one tool, but because it's not good practice to only use one tool. You should get two opinions. You should look at how two different tools handle a piece of research or a piece of writing so that you can more critically evaluate those options. Anyway, we have lots of good questions here. There's a lot to say. And let me try to do a poor job at answering both of them because they're both excellent questions. One, Kathy asked the question, essentially, I don't really want to, let me just paraphrase it to say, I'm not sure that I really want to talk to an avatar of my member of Congress or a deep fake, a quote, deep fake of my representative. That seems really deeply unsatisfying. I'm really curious, Kathy, how often, again, now you get to talk to a member of Congress? Done right, obviously there's a way of doing this that's going to be ineffectual, right? Which is if this is just about your member of Congress essentially using AI to ask you for money in a new way, or using AI to just, parrot some marketing slogans at you, it's going to be deeply unsatisfying. But let me be very clear. It's right now, if you call Congress, do you know how many calls Congress is receiving? Faxes, emails, calls, and letters from constituents, and how desperately underwater they are. I wish I had the number handy because it's a really, really, really large number and it's growing. It means that your member of Congress and their very small staff have no time to actually do the work of legislating because they can barely get through the mail. So you're not going to get a response from them. You're not going to hear from them. It means you don't get to know what your member of Congress is doing. And more importantly, they don't ever get to hear what it is you care about and you're concerned about because they can't read all this stuff that's coming into them. But Sean Melton, member of Congress from California, thanks, I might add, to some of our students who built the very first experiments in using AI. There's no avatar of Sean Moulton yet, but essentially using AI to just help him better summarize and categorize and organize what he's hearing from citizens, so that he can listen better and be more responsive. I think that's a huge advance over what we have today. And yes, is it a satisfying experience? We've got to test it. We've got to try it out. Maybe it's deeply unsatisfying and we shouldn't do it, but we'll never know unless we try it. And it cannot be worse than the system we have today, where you cannot get through on the phone. Nobody reads your letter. Nobody reads your call. Nobody responds to your concerns, and nobody hears what you want. And finally, there was a question here about whether it's really realistic. Is there any promise, or have we seen any evidence in which essentially these tools are changing or could change the way power is wielded? That's my sort of short summary of the comment from Woody, and he asks a really kind of good question about, it might be really hard to amend the Constitution, or it's not abolish the Senate, but enlarge the Senate. But is it realistic that people are going to devolve power? Again, a really hard and long question. And no, it's not realistic that anybody ever wants to give up power. But if a legislator, for example, could get smarter about what citizens actually care about and listen to ordinary people and what their concerns are, then they would become less dependent only on what lobbyists tell them. If a member of Congress or a city councilor or a state representative or another part of government can use AI to help them research and write a proposal that is more informed by facts and by evidence, they will become less dependent on a draft that's written for them, which they just copy and paste from an interest group like ALEC that is trying to essentially push their own agenda. And instead, they could be more representative to what their constituents actually care about. Does this depend on how we design these systems? And do they require very careful thought, testing, and research into what actually will improve the current situation? Absolutely. But that is why it is so important for us to have an agenda around democratic AI that is not just focused on talking about the things we should not do, but I think that is urgently asking the question, what things can we do to make our systems work better? I know we have 2 minutes left, so I'll end with one last example. Again, coming back to our students here in the AI for Impacts program. We had 2 students last semester who worked with the Division of Elections in a state to look at how we could use AI to make better sense of, streamline, and simplify the electoral information that this state was providing to residents, to poll workers, to counties, and to locals administering elections, because through no fault of their own, that state had been putting information on the web since the web started, adding another page, adding another page, adding another page, making it increasingly difficult for anybody to find answers to their questions. And in this day and age, when the rules are changing and nobody quite knows what they might be, and there are new executive orders coming out about elections and citizenship and who's allowed to vote and mail-in voting and what's legal and what's not legal, we all need answers to our questions if we want things to function well. So they built a tool to make it easier just to essentially streamline that content and allow government officials to rewrite it in plain English in ways that might be easier for people to find. Not rocket science, but so desperately needed to make things work better. So we got to pick off that low hanging fruit that's going to deepen our democracy. Let me stop there and thank you, Sherry, for you and your colleagues for organizing this for everybody to their wonderful questions. And I'm sorry for all the ones we didn't get to.
One last one for you. At least earlier, you all were working on this. What I wrote down from your one of your sites, Civic and Democratic AI, a new course for community action. Is this this is different from the training I think you mentioned um, in your presentation, but is this something that's ongoing?
It is. We will be rolling out this fall a new WhatsApp-based course on civic AI. It will be available via your mobile phone, 8 videos, each one less than 5 minutes, that teaches what is AI, how do I use it to engage with my government, how do I use it to engage with community members, how do I use it to get involved. So I think the best thing to do is to sign up at the rebootdemocracy.ai link to get an announcement for that. And also what you'll find up there, last thing I'll just announce here, you'll also find it under events at Reboot Democracy, and I'll put this one up, is beginning tomorrow. Together with political philosopher Danielle Allen, we will be launching a workshop series that is focused specifically on the question of how do we use AI to improve citizen engagement and citizen participation. We'll be welcoming a lot of really leading practitioners talking about how they're doing that in their jurisdiction, including Audrey Tang from Taiwan will be speaking, but also the head of citizen engagement for Hamburg. We'll be welcoming officials from Bowling Green. The Jigsaw people are coming and others to come talk about what is the potential, what is the risk, and what are the opportunities with these new tools going forward.
Okay, well, that's great. I did see the announcement of the, I think it's September. There's one coming up very soon.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. So, well,
Okay.
thank you so much, Beth, for joining us and helping us look at AI in a different way and perhaps how we can use it more proactively to take some good steps forward, to engage more people, collect more information, be more participatory in our government. So for all of you online, a recording of today's conversation will be posted to the League of Women Voters of Maine's website soon. And you look under advocacy and then digital democracy. We have all the recordings of earlier speakers, including some that Beth mentioned. We had Beth Goldberg from Jigsaw, and we've had several of the other people that you mentioned on our series. So please watch seminars that you might have missed. Now, for coming up, we're taking a little break to review what we've heard over the past couple of years, reflect on the ideas and thoughts, and figure out what our next step is going to be in terms of league action, as well as just, personal growth. If any of you would like to join us and be part of that work, please contact Ann Luther with the League of Women Voters of Maine. And her email is Ann, just ANN, .m.luther@gmail.com. But keep your eyes open for new developments as we go forward with this project. So thanks again to Beth and to all of you for joining us with the Leagues of Maine, Alaska, and Colorado. So bye for now.